going to start our recording. As we record today's session, our recording is only of our speaker view. So our recording will just be of myself and our expert, Jill Tietjen. So if you are joining on video, and I love when girls join us on video, our recording will not include your faces and your names. So just a heads up for that. So thank you so much again for joining us. My name is Amy Artzer. I am our Community Partnerships Manager. So anytime that anybody outside of Girl Scouts wants to do something with Girl Scouts, I have the wonderful privilege of being able to work with them. And we have our wonderful co-host and expert today, Jill Tietjen, and she's going to join us speaking here in just a few moments. But a few housekeeping items. So we will be keeping everybody on mute for most of today's session. You will have an opportunity to unmute later, and you can always use the chat box to engage with us. So right now the chat box is closed to everyone except myself and Jill. So if you have any technical issues or questions and things like that, you can enter them in there. We will open our chat box later for you to answer some fun questions from Jill and for you to ask Jill any of your questions. You can ask her about her career, her education, her personal hobbies, things like that. It's going to be an open Q&A a little bit later, so we'll use the chat box mostly for that. Additionally, we do have girls of all ages on today's webinar, so please keep that in mind as you ask questions. Anybody entering anything into the chat box that is inappropriate or super irrelevant, we'll ask you to please stop doing that, and then might have to remove you from the webinar if the content is inappropriate. So just want to give everyone a heads up about that. So let's go ahead and get started with our Girl Scouts Promise and Law. So please join me along at home. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. Now, of course, the Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. All right, well, well done, everybody at home. I'm now going to turn things over to our expert, Jill, who it just impresses me every time I get to work with her, and I'm so excited to have her on today. So welcome, Jill, and take it away.
All righty, well, thank you, Amy. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start with a little background about myself and my education, what I've done in my career. And then we're going to do collectively a little exercise together. And hopefully some of you will either unmute or participate by chat. It is meant to be interactive, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it. So I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, which is right on the coast, on the east coast of Virginia. My dad was an engineer at NASA Langley. And if anybody saw, I can see some of you, if anybody saw the movie Hidden Figures, does that sound familiar to you at all? Did anybody see that movie? If you saw that movie Hidden Figures, those women actually worked at the same place that my dad worked. That's where I grew up. And my dad is not alive anymore, so I can't ask him if he knew them, but he had to have known them. And I actually probably knew the actual women who are in Hidden Figures. So I'm the oldest of 4 children. I grew up in Virginia. Since Dad worked for NASA Langley, I was going to go to college within, it's called the Commonwealth, not the state of Virginia. And I decided that I was going to go to the University of Virginia. That was the place that really appealed most to me. And I was very fortunate that by the time I wanted to go, which was the fall of 1972, and you can all do the math and figure out how old I am, that the University of Virginia admitted women. So I'm in the 3rd class of women that were admitted to the University of Virginia after a young woman who grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where the University of Virginia is located, filed a lawsuit against the University of Virginia because women were not admitted. Can you believe at that point in time here, for somebody who's still alive like me, that women couldn't go to school at the University of Virginia just because they were women. So I went to the University of Virginia and I started as a math major. I loved calculus. I actually like physics. I can't stand chemistry. I really do not like biology. But I started as a math major in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I saw what all the kids were doing who were taking engineering classes. And that's what I wanted to do. Nobody had encouraged me to be an engineer, to think about studying engineering. So I went, I talked to the dean, I did all of the paperwork that was required, and I transferred to the engineering school. I have a degree in applied mathematics with a minor in electrical engineering. And then it was time for me to look for a job because I was getting ready to graduate. And I was also engaged at that point in time to the man that turned out to be my first husband. And he was a nuclear engineer, and all of the electric utilities wanted him. And no, well, there were plenty of people that wanted me too, but they weren't in the same place. And so we had to find somebody who wanted to employ both of us in the same place because we weren't going to get married otherwise. And Duke Power Company in Charlotte, North Carolina wanted him and wanted me. And I became a planning engineer. And what that means is I helped plan all the power plants. An electric utility, and we're going to do a little example here in just a minute. An electric utility has to look 20 years out in the future. Think about how old you will be in 20 years. Okay? So in 20 years, a utility looks at that entire time frame from now to 20 years in the future and figures out based on how much electricity you're going to use at home and your parents are going to use at their job and you're going to use when you go to college and you use when you go and have a job, how much all that electricity is required so that they can make sure that you have enough electricity for everything that you want to do. And so what I did was I ran computer models that simulated the operation of the utility system and then helped figure out what new power plants were required over the long term. So that included, at the time, nuclear power, hydroelectric power, which is water, coal, oil, natural gas, solar, wind, geothermal, biomass. And in 1979, I did a very large study on looking at all of the renewable energy resources that were being developed at that point in time, including solar and wind and all kinds of other things. Ocean thermal, which is, and then tidal power, which uses the tides to actually generate electricity, to figure out what might be the kinds of renewable energy that my employer, Duke Power Company, would be interested in using. So at this point in time, here's what I want to do. And this is, Amy, where we can open the chat. We can actually, if people want to unmute, they can unmute. And here's what I want you to think about. And I'm gonna write it here. Do you see this easel piece of paper? On this top of this easel piece of paper, I want you to think about what uses electricity at your house, in your city, in your community, anywhere in the area at 2 o'clock in the morning. So what uses electricity at 2 o'clock in the morning?
So anyone you can unmute yourself if you would like to. You can use the chat box to answer Jill's question as well. As answers come in through the chat box, I'll read them out loud. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started and say my cell phone charger.
Okay, so there is something, cell phone charger, refrigerators, okay.
An air conditioner.
Okay, I'm just gonna
That box.
abbreviate. I'm sorry?
Air conditioning from Heather
Yes.
Kelly.
Okay,
Um,
heater.
yep. Amy says
Hospital, oh,
bathroom.
very, what was that, Amy?
A nightlight in the bathroom.
Night lights, okay.
Heaters.
Lights, okay.
Addie says her fan.
Fan. Okay. Street lights, you bet. Gas stations, very good. Now think more like that on in terms of gas stations. What else is using electricity at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Caitlin put animal shelters.
You bet.
Radio.
Okay.
Police station.
Yes. What else? Electric car. Yeah, they're probably charging at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yes, electric cars are charging, so they use a fire station. Very good.
Morgan wrote companies that operate overnight, such as manufacturing.
Manufacturers and 24 hours. Who is open 24 hours?
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
That's my answer.
Who else? Airports. Very good. Who else? We got hospital. You can't see it, but it's right there. Thank you. Kroger. Yes. So Kroger, grocery stores. Do you think those freezers and refrigerators in the Walmart, they use electricity at 2 o'clock in the morning? Right. Very good. Lamps. Yes. All of these are very good. There's actually a does that say pharmacy under there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, pharmacies, yes. What else? Chargers, yes, we got chargers. You just can't see it because it's too small. This phones, yes. And what about big? What about big?
What about like cell phone towers and things
Cell phone
to
towers.
the internet?
So data centers.
Mm.
Internet, we've got refrigerators, yes, absolutely. Data centers or refrigerators. And you guys got a lot of the bank, yes. What about all those lights? Well, power lines are always used, yes, but what about all those lights on office buildings? Think about that. The lights in the office buildings, you know, when you drive by and you see the lights inside the buildings at night? Christmas lights, you bet. And I'm going to tell you the one that not very many, all the lights, yes. One that
Somebody put the glowing M in golden on the mountain. I like that.
Of course. So we've got hospitals, we've got airports, computers, we've got fire stations and gas stations and police stations. We've got fountains. Here's
snowmakers.
Very many people think about, and that is jails. Jails are actually a 24-hour business too. Is that a part? Boarding schools, all of them. Yes. All right. Thank you very, very much. Yes, the apartments. Yes. And hotels. Hotels. Those also. All right. So then what happens is I'm going to draw a graph. I hope that I can figure out a way that you can see it.
See it. I mean, it's a little small, but I can see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to draw a graph down here. And this graph is going to be, can you see the bottom of that or not?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Oops,
Yep.
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do that.
Perfect.
All right. So can you see? There
That looks good.
There, okay. So this graph is going to be a day. So it's 24 hours. We start right here, and this is midnight. This is noon, and I have terrible writing, and this is midnight again. And we just said that all of these things are using electricity at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when you think about how much electricity is used over the course of the day, what it actually looks like, and this is on a hot summer day. So on a hot summer day, it looks something like this. And you can see that, right? You can see that. So here's what has to happen. You have to have enough power plants to do this here, the high part, but then you have to have power plants that can provide this electricity during all of that period of time. So, because this is what's called baseload. That means you operate that 24 hours a day. So, okay, thank you, Amy. So I want you to think about, remember I told you all of the kinds of electricity or fuel that power plants that I used or that we looked at to figure out how to fill your electricity needs for the next 20 years? What kinds of power plants and where do you think they go? Here. And by the way, this curve, the way you fill it, is from cheapest to most expensive in terms of the cost to operate the power plant. So when you think about that, so if the choices are, see, the choices are nuclear, hydro, coal, oil, gas, solar, wind. That's enough for right now. Does anybody want to guess what the cheapest ones are? And this, can we do this in a chat or by verbal? Okay, wind and nuclear is what I saw so far. Was there something else, Amy?
No, that's all. Coal,
okay.
solar,
wind. Okay, so here's actually the cheapest ones are wind, solar, and water. Water is actually free. The fuel itself is free, just like solar and wind. So that's what you do with the water is if you can, you operate it 24 hours a day free. Now, there's something interesting about solar and wind. And the interesting thing about solar is what? Sophia, I think can she unmute?
Yeah, anybody should be able to unmute themselves if they
So
would.
Sophia, do you want to unmute and tell me because you have your hand up, which I can see? Aha, Catherine gave the answer. Only during the day. So you can only generate with solar. Usually the best hours are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Even if it's on your house, you can't generate solar unless you have a battery backup system, but that's a whole nother discussion, except during the day from about 9 a.m. to about 3 p.m. So what that means is that this is solar and you actually reduce, you bring the load curve down so that the other resources only have to generate this amount and not this amount that's provided by the solar. Now, what happens with wind? Sophia, yes.
Caitlin put in the chat, you can only use it when it's windy enough.
When it's windy. And most of the wind resources, and it depends, if you have offshore wind, it's actually possible for it to blow 24 hours a day. But often in the continental US, over the land, the wind is actually at its best at night. But the issue is that you can only use wind when the wind blows. You can only use sun when the sun is out, unless you have some storage or other mechanism. And so we're just going to do something like this for the wind and something like this for the wind. And so now somebody else said nuclear. Oh, Sophia says she can't unmute. Okay. So nuclear, somebody else said nuclear, and that goes here. So now we've taken care of nuclear, hydro, solar, and wind. So we have coal, oil, and gas. And so what happens with those is that, and it depends on the time of day, and it depends in the area of the country, and it depends on a lot of other things. But usually, and now there's actually gas and coal change place all the time. And so now we've got probably gas here. And then coal here. And then oil up here. And so this is what the models that I used did. They did this mathematically to figure out what were the existing power plants on the utility system, when was a new power plant going to be required, and what kind of fuel it should have. So I think I'm finished, Amy, with my presentation, and can now have the Q&A if that's okay with you.
Sure. Thank you, Jill. That was very interesting, and definitely, I have to say, when you asked the question about solar, I was like, so thank you all for that interesting lesson for myself. So girls, now we can take questions. You can ask Jill questions about, like I said, her education, her career. She's also a STEM champion and an advocate for women in many different ways. So this is a great opportunity to learn from her. I'll get things started while we wait for, so you can enter questions into the chat box, or you can, it says that you can unmute yourself, but if you're having trouble, just shoot me a message and I can unmute you for you. But
so the question is, were you in Girl Scouts? And the answer to the question is, I am a lifetime Girl Scout. When I started in Girl Scouts many years ago, there weren't daisies. So I started as a brownie. I was a brownie, then I was a junior, and then I was a cadet. And unfortunately, when I became a cadet, my troop kind of fell apart. And so I wasn't a Girl Scout after a cadet. But then I was on the board of Girl Scouts Smile High Council. I was actually chair of the board, and I became a lifetime Girl Scout. So I've been a lifetime Girl Scout now since 1999. I'm a Girl Scout Woman of Distinction, and I'm very, very proud to be a Girl Scout. So, Amy, you want to moderate these because I can see them come fast, and let's just do them one at a time, or whatever you think.
Yeah, so Amy asked, was it hard to get into college? And before you answer that, I'm keeping an eye on the chat box, so we'll go through the questions, try to get them in the order. So girls, you don't have to enter your question in multiple times. We'll work our way through them.
Okay.
So was it hard to get into college?
Here's what you have to do in order to get into college. You have to do your homework. You have to do your projects. You have to get good grades. And if you do that, and if you work, and if you study, and if you learn the material that you're supposed to learn, then yes, you can get into college. And there are lots of colleges that would be happy to have you because you're obviously a young woman of courage, confidence, and character. And that's the kind of person that they want to have in college.
Great.
So I don't think you're going to have problems, but you do have to do your work. You have to go to school. You have to do your homework. You have to turn in your projects. You have to learn your stuff. You have to, well, who knows if there'll still be standardized tests by the time you get there, but you have to do all those things. All right, so I'm just going to let you filter because.
So Sophia asked, how do you make nuclear energy? And I mean, I don't know if you have a short and sweet answer for that.
Nuclear energy is actually made from uranium that is, it's called enriched, but it's atomic matter. So it's at very small scale atomic matter made from uranium-235 and 238, which you don't even want to know. Those are isotopes of uranium. And anyway, it's atoms. I can't remember what grade you learned this in, and I know some of you are older and some of you are younger, but when you study physics and you study atoms, you know that there are protons, neutrons, and electrons, and this is a function of the atom shedding electrons and interactions with other atoms. That's how you make nuclear power. And that might have been not exactly right, but it's close enough.
Cool. So we have a lot of great questions coming in. I'm going to try to combine a few of them. So Julia asked, what is your current job and what is the hardest part? And then Heather and Kelly asked, what is the hardest part of your job? So I don't know if you can kind of combo answer those.
Well, you saw from my bio that one of the things that what I mostly do, 40 plus years, actually 43 years. Well, you could still say I'm still there in the electric utility industry. I actually sit on a utility board in Georgia, and I'm going to be on that board for a number of years more. And so, but what I really do now is I research historical women and I write books about women and I write women back into history, and I speak all over the country, or I used to before COVID, about historical women in the US. I'm actually also working on historical women in Africa. And it all started because of all of the research that I did on historical women in science, engineering, technology, and math, and in STEM fields, and nominating those women for national awards. What is the hardest part of what I do? Well, I'm my own company, so I have to do everything. I have to pay all the bills. I have to maintain the website. I have to update the website. I write the books. I deal with the publishers. I do the contracting. I do everything else as well. And I'm my own boss, which I really, really, really like.
Very cool. So like I said, I'm going to try and theme these questions together so we don't go like too all over the place. What was your favorite class in school?
I would have to say that, well, okay, so are we talking about along the way, college, graduate school, because I have an MBA also in addition to my engineering degree? I would say that calculus was probably my favorite class. And then in college, probably my favorite class was something called numerical methods, which is basically advanced math, and doing it on writing programs to do mathematical calculations on a computer, which was very, very different than working with a computer than it is today. My computer wasn't anywhere near as capable as this smartphone. Nowhere near.
Okay, so we have some questions about your life. So what do you like to do? Have you ridden a horse? What's your favorite sport? Do you have pets? Tell us about you. Who's Jill outside of what we already know.
Okay, so my favorite sport, well, my favorite really athletic activity probably is snorkeling. I just absolutely love snorkeling. I haven't done it in quite a while, but I love snorkeling. So the one that I do, I actually played tennis this morning. And I still play singles tennis, and I have a tennis partner, and she and I play tennis. We have two cats. They're sisters. Their names are Pearl and Merle. Merle is spelled M-E-R-L-E, and Pearl is P-E-A-R-L. And I'm actually really surprised that Pearl has not come in here and taken my desk chair away from me, because in the afternoon, she believes that this chair, my desk chair, is her chair. And although she's about 11 pounds, she can muscle me out of my desk chair. Cool, somebody has a dog named Pearl too. Did I answer all of them that you asked?
Have you ridden a horse?
Have I ridden a horse? Yes. I rode a horse when I was probably 10 or 11. There were horse stables at the Langley Air Force Base where NASA Langley is located. And I went and rode a horse, and I'm not really very good at it. I mean, there were so many of my friends who were just horse crazy when we were like in 3rd grade and 4th grade and 5th grade and 6th grade. And so I had to ride a horse too. And I'm not good at it.
Okay, so, well, is it difficult to publish books? Amy asks that.
Oh my goodness. The answer to your question is, with self-publishing software available everywhere now, it's no longer very hard to publish a book. To publish a book that is a best-selling book, that has the support of a national or international publisher, that is very hard. And to get their support, unless your name is somebody like, oh, Michelle Obama or Hillary Clinton, you know, then, or Oprah Winfrey, then you can get the support of a national publisher. And otherwise, it just requires you to do a lot of marketing work associated with your books.
Interesting. Okay, so more questions coming in. Sophia asked, how do you get energy that's in a power plant into a light or into your home? And I'm sure we could do like several webinars.
Well, that's the miracle. That's the miracle of the electric utility system. And it's something that you actually can't see. I mean, you can see the equipment that does it, but you can't actually see the electricity. So a power plant, and let's just use one that has a turbine because it's just easier to talk about. So the turbine turns, and there's water that is going through the turbine that is, well, it's actually heated to steam in a boiler. The boiler then sends the steam into the turbine. When the turbine turns, it generates electricity. It leaves the power plant and goes into what's called the transmission system. So those are the big towers that you see along like major interstates and major highways. Those are the big aluminum and steel towers. That it transmits the electricity from the power plant into cities and towns, where it goes through equipment called a transformer, and then it goes into the distribution system, where it's then sent to your house or your school or your business or a store, and or the street lights. There are different classes of electric users. You're at your home, you're a residential user. Kroger is, or King Soopers is a commercial user. And then a manufacturing facility is an industrial user. And it takes a lot of people to do that, and a lot of planning. I didn't plan the transmission or the distribution. I just planned the power plants, and that's called the generation.
Okay, so two Girl Scout related questions. Do you remember your troop number? And
No.
sell cookies when you were in Girl Scouts?
Yes, I sold cookies when I was in Girl Scouts. I absolutely did. And I know that she's going to ask me this question later, so I'm just going to cut her off at the pass right now. For many, many years, my favorite cookie was Thin Mints. But I've actually learned to, well, when I could eat them, I'm now gluten-free, so I can't eat any of these cookies, most of them. And then I loved tagalongs. I just thought that that peanut butter chocolate mix was great. So yes, I did actually, Amy, see a question. Did I play a musical instrument?
Oh, I missed that.
And I played the violin from the time I was 8, and I played it for 33 years. I played it in orchestras from the time I was 8. I played in high school orchestras, which were not part of the school. They were separate then. I played in my college orchestra, and then I played in community orchestras in North Carolina and here in Colorado.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, so Heather and Kelly asked if you could give us only one piece of advice, what would it be?
If I could give you one piece of advice, I would tell you to always do your personal best at everything that you do. You don't have to be the best. You have to do your personal best. You have to hold yourself to that standard.
That is a wonderful piece of advice. Julia asked, do you remember how many cookies you sold?
If I told you how old I was, you would probably faint. It was a long time ago. No, I have no idea. And when I was chair of the board here of Mile High Council, I always used to go to the cookie dinners. And that was, at the time, that was for girls who sold 600 boxes of cookies or more. And so I used to shake hands and give them medals and do all those kinds of things at the cookie dinner. But I don't think I sold anywhere near 600 boxes of cookies. But I don't have really any idea.
Cool. All right. So Elizabeth asked, do you have a favorite woman in history?
Do I have a favorite woman?
In history.
In history, yes, I do. I actually have a lot. I have thousands of favorite women in history, but really the woman who was the catalyst for everything that I've done her name was Admiral Grace Murray Hopper. And I don't know if anyone knows who Admiral Grace Murray Hopper was, but Admiral Hopper actually made it possible for us to be on Zoom today. Admiral Hopper invented the computer compiler. This was in 1952, 1940. Yeah, it was after right around the time of World War II. I think I have her in my book in 1943. And what she did was she made it possible for computers to be used by people who were not mathematicians and physicists. And she made it possible for us to talk to computers in our human languages. So English or French or German or Chinese or Swahili, whatever, or Japanese, any language that we have, we can now program a computer using our languages because she developed the software, which is called the computer compiler, that translates our languages into the zeros and ones that a computer actually understands. A computer understands zeros and ones. And so the whole story is pretty long, but let me just do the very short version. I nominated her for the National Medal of Technology which is the United States equivalent of the Nobel Prize awarded by the President of the United States. She received that medal. She was the first individual woman to receive that medal in 1991. And she was too frail to come to the White House to receive it. So she asked me to receive it for her in the Rose Garden from the first President Bush. So I was in the Rose Garden in September of 1991 to receive Admiral Hopper's National Medal of Technology. And then she was my first successful nomination into the National Women's Hall of Fame, and that happened after she died. And that was she died January 1st, 92, and she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1994. And the family asked me to receive that medal on her behalf. And so I went to Seneca Falls, New York, which is the birthplace of women's rights, where the first Women's Rights Convention was held in 1848. It's the home of the National Women's Hall of Fame, and received her medal on her behalf. And then in early January of 1996, I was in Maine, Bath, Maine, at the Bath Iron Works for the launching of the destroyer Hopper. There's a United States Navy guided missile destroyer named for Admiral Hopper, whose nickname for herself and for the ship is Amazing Grace. So she's my favorite, but I have many, many, many favorites. She's my
very cool. That's, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, Jill.
Well, I can tell you stories about so many women who made it possible okay, so here's another, she's not my unfavorite, but she's, so all of you are using a computer or a phone in order to be on this Zoom. And on your computer or your phone, and I'm going to hold it up, is non-reflective glass. That's what this glass is. It's non-reflective glass. You can see yourself a little bit, but it's not like a mirror. And so non-reflective glass was invented by a physicist at General Electric. Her name was Catherine Blodgett. And she was the first woman physicist hired by General Electric. So I can tell these stories. I can tell them all day. I have many, many, many favorites. I've researched these women for years and years and years. We're going on now, it's more than 30 years. And I've written books. I saw one of the questions. I now have 10 books. I'm working on more right now. So I have 10 books, 2 of which were best-selling and award-winning books. And that was Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, and Hollywood, Her Story, An Illustrated History of Women in the Movies. And we just won an award on 3 awards actually Thursday night. So we're still winning awards for that book.
Very cool. So very cool. Okay, so some more questions came in. Okay, so Catherine writes, and I'm going to read her question word for word. To what extent are utilities looking into time of use incentives? Everything from encouraging highly insulated hot water heating at night or freezing a liquid at night to use instead of AC with blowers during peak energy use times.
I understand the question.
Okay.
And the answer is that utilities have been looking at these kinds of technologies since I looked at them in 1979. And I assume that there are extensive studies going on still today to look at them. One of the things that has happened because of COVID is that the demand for electricity has fallen. Just like when you don't go to a restaurant, or people don't go to a restaurant or theaters, then there aren't sales taxes that are collected by the cities, and cities are having to do tremendous budget cuts. When utilities don't have the level of power sales that they expected to have, then there isn't the same level of money that's available to do research and development and to look at different kinds of programs.
Interesting. Okay, I want to go through these questions here. So you told us how many books you've written. What made you want to write books?
This story takes a little bit, and it's really why I could tell you about Catherine Blodgett and Admiral Hopper. In 1987, my very dear friend, petroleum engineer Alexis Swoboda, went to the Society of Women Engineers National Convention. I was a member of the society, I'm still a member of the Society of Women Engineers, and said, Jill, I've heard about this outreach program that I think we should put in place here in Denver. And it's an essay contest on great women in engineering and science. And I said, as I always said to Alexis, actually, Alexis, that is a great idea. And then I said, who are they? Because in 1987, I knew one historical woman in engineering and science anywhere in the world, and that was Marie Curie. And so that started the research into historical women. We started writing articles for magazines and giving presentations at conferences. And with all of the information that we gathered, it was really important to me to write a history of women in engineering. And then one day, my friend, one of my other friends, Christy, called me up in a total panic and said, I was at a restaurant in downtown Denver last night, and I met the publisher and the editor from Prentice Hall, and they want me to write a book on, it's called Keys to Engineering Success, which is study skills and budgeting skills and all kinds of other skills to make sure that you could be a success in an engineering education. And she said, they want to go to lunch, and we're going to lunch. And I said, okay. So we went to lunch. And so then there was another book, Keys to Engineering Success. I met another woman, and that's a long, long story, but the bottom line was 3 books got published in that series. Then I met my co-author Charlotte in 2003, and after lunch she said, we're going to write a book together, and that's her story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America. And by that time, you know, everybody comes to me and they say, we want to write this book, we want to write that book. I say, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I approach them. And so now 10 books and 3 that I'm working on right now. Well, yeah, 3 that I'm, and maybe 4 that I'm working on. I'm not sure what's happened to that co-author. I'm not sure if she's sick or not. And I haven't heard from her in a while. She's in Washington State.
Okay, I want to make sure we get all the questions. Julia, asks, what was your least favorite subject in school?
Chemistry was I still can't stand it. So here is an important piece of information. You do not have to love every science and every math class that you take in order to be in a science, technology, engineering, or math career. I am not a good chemistry student. I am not a good biology student. I am a reasonable physics student, and I'm a good math student, but you don't have to like them all. You don't have to be outstanding in them all. You don't have to be the top student in them all in order to pursue a career in any of the sciences, engineering, math, or computer science, any of those. Oh, and when I got I have a master's in business administration. And when I got my MBA, the class that I detested, absolutely detested, didn't understand, didn't like, don't think it makes any sense, don't like the results, was business law. Class I have used the most in my entire career was business law. So even if you can't stand it, hopefully you enough that you can then use it at some later point in time, which I did. I got my MBAs from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and I got their Distinguished Alumna Award in October of 2018. And what I said in my remarks that day was just what I just told you. The class that I disliked the most was business law. The class that I used the most was business law. And I told them in October of 2018 that the last time I had used business law at that point was the day before.
Wow.
So sometimes, even if you don't like a particular class, it still has for you and you still can learn and use it and apply it.
Great. So Catherine asked a question. As you notice, it's common for scientists to marry other scientists and it's difficult for them to both find a job in the same town. Did you have trouble with that? She notes that Colorado has a law that prohibits discrimination against married coworkers, so you can work for a company and they can hire both spouses.
I will answer the question. And what I will also say is some of the historical women that I've researched had terrible problems with what are called nepotism laws, which are now which are not in place anymore. But well, they are, but not the same way. The way it was then was that if a university hired the husband, they were actually precluded from law by hiring the wife or vice versa. And those kinds of laws don't exist anymore. But what they now say is you can't have a wife who is the boss of the husband or the husband who is the boss of the wife in order to eliminate conflicts of interest. And my first husband and I were both engineers. He was a nuclear engineer. I was math and electrical. And Duke Power hired both of us, and we were in very separate divisions, and there wasn't really an issue about that. And then it did take us we started looking for new jobs in 1980. It took us a year and a half to find suitable jobs for both of us in Denver in 1981. And we didn't have a problem after that. We got divorced in 1994. And my current husband, although he is more handy and has more practical knowledge than I am ever going to have, he is not an educated engineer. He helped me put the easel together. I can't even figure out how to do that. I have no mechanical engineering abilities at all.
All right. Julia asked if you have any kids.
I was not able to have children, so I don't have any children. And that's just the way it worked out. I went through extensive treatment and wasn't able to get pregnant.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so we're kind of just running up against 5 o'clock here. So I'm gonna, I guess, wrap things up. We don't have any other questions in the chat box. So I'm gonna ask you to tell us about what you feel is your greatest success and how that's impacted you and the world.
Well, it's the combination of Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, Hollywood, Her Story, An Illustrated History of Women in the Movies. What I'm doing now, and I'm doing it all the time, is telling women's stories and writing women into history. And that is changing the world. Because when we demonstrate as a society, when other societies demonstrate that women have value, which is what the issue is, that women don't have value, that women aren't second-class citizens, that women are smart, that women are capable, that women are accomplished, that women's contributions need to be recognized. When we do that, what we actually do is lift the entire society. The United Nations has said that the way that we improve the situations anywhere in the world is by making sure that we educate girls. So we educate girls, and then we tell the stories of women, and I believe that that's my contribution.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is a great place to end things today. I know that I learned a ton, and I feel a little bit more inspired to do my personal best as the days go on. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jill. Thank you so much to all the Girl Scouts who were able to join us today. I want to make mention of two quick things is that one, Jill is a member, an inductee of the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, and we do have a Colorado Women's Hall of Fame Girl Scout patch. So I would think that by participating today, you've completed one of the requirements towards that patch, and you can go do some additional activities that are really fun and interesting. And if you're interested in learning about more women who have made an impact in history, earning that patch is a great way to continue doing that. And we will have our Meet an Expert patch should be available online very soon. I'll send out everyone who's done a Meet an Expert session an email when it's available online. And I would think this qualifies as part of the STEM portion of that patch because there's multiple pieces to it. So you'll get emails about those things, but definitely some great ways to show off some of the things that you all learned today. Like I said, I learned a ton. This was awesome. A great way for me to spend my afternoon. So I hope all the girls out there feel the same. So thank you so much, Jill.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
All right. And I have a quick, I'm going to launch a quick poll here as we wrap up. So you can just tell us if you enjoyed today. And you're free to close things out. Once we get some answers in, I'll end the meeting. But thank you all so much. I hope you had a great time.